What's up, fam? Robert Teagarden. Talking about filmmaking tips, the business of being a creative, helping you create your own path. Still trying to hack away at this YouTube live thing. I'm actually feeling it, really like these types of conversations, so happy you guys are joining me today as well. As the title implies, we're talking about the super infamous at this point A7S Mark III and the Canon EOS R5. Am I switching back to Canon? I've got all this lovely Canon glass behind me. Let's get to talking quickly about what's going on with these particular cameras and the video side of this world in and of itself. I think that this is really an awesome time to be a filmmaker, especially if you're looking for the DSLR or the mirrorless side of things without rocking super huge cine cams. To me, it's definitely an interesting dynamic that's being played at this point. I think I kind of want to start this off. Someone had sent me a message asking if I'm going to cop to one of the EOS lines, either the R6 or the R5. My initial response is I'm waiting to see what's happening. Not to let the cat out of the bag too quickly, but I'm waiting to see what's happening. And the reason I'm waiting to see what's happening is kind of my tongue-in-cheek little curt response back was, we've been waiting for a Canon camera to service our needs as videographers for the last 5 or so years, ever since the 5D Mark II came out. And they basically went like this, la 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 la, and didn't listen to what we were saying. Meanwhile, Sony has 5 different cameras that service the video creator market fairly well. It's not perfect, but they do a good job. And they're ever improving, which is something that I'll talk about in a second. So am I immediately switching back to Canon because they have this amazing kind of flagship camera that's here? I'm not sure yet. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. Let's just kind of get a couple things out of the way at first. Let's talk a little bit about specs. I'm sure you guys have seen it, but really the rumor mill that's surrounding Canon and Sony have been fierce for the last couple of months, so to speak. Let's talk a little bit. We kind of know all of the specs where Canon is concerned, but let's take a look at exactly what this is. So, what is the difference between these two? But really what we look at and what we're concerned about in terms of video creation, the thing that is blowing the doors off the Canon R5, is that it has this 8K raw video capability. If you've seen the samples, which I'm sure you have at some point, ungraded sample footage looks amazing. It's gorgeous. Obviously, what you would think would happen in an 8K situation like that is the resolution is just phenomenal. You can see fibers on people's shirts, tiny bits of pieces of fuzz on their hair. It's definitely a bad time to be an aging news anchor because all of those blemishes are definitely going to be showing as we kind of etch into these higher frame rate 6K and 8K deliverables that we edit from. 4K at 120 FPS. Ooh, God, that looks amazing. The sample footage is just incredible, super crisp and clean, but also just beautiful in terms of what the slow-mo is showing us in that regard as well. There's a massive, I think it's a 61 megapixel sensor for the images, for still images. And then all of the different things that come along with that. It's got silent shooting mode. It's got a fully articulating screen, which Canon has been giving us for quite some time. And then the same LP batteries, the same amazing Canon color science, the same great Canon user menus. All of those things really are fantastic and reasons why Canon continues to lead the pack where digital imaging is concerned. They've been in the game for a long time. And so the things that tend to irritate me about working with Sony in terms of the ergonomics and the menu system, Canon has on lockdown because they've been doing it for a longer period of time. It's not to say that Sony isn't great in improving, it's just that they've been doing it for a longer period of time. So we've seen kind of specs and pre-orders, all the different things. So if you want a kit lens, you're looking at around $5,000 for the body and a kit lens. It's a decent kit lens, but and then if you want just the body only, we're looking at just under $4,000 for the body. The thing is that these are using those newer F-mounted glass as well. So you'd have to adapt any of your older L series lenses, which is something that it annoys me. All of this Canon glass is basically useless. So for me, switching over to that side of the fence is something that not only includes the camera body, but I also have to start investing in glass as well. And I'm pretty deep into a Sony universe where glass is concerned. So with that being said, Sony Alpha rumors have been going crazy. What we have so far is we definitely have a release date. They're saying that it's coming this summer. They're kind of still eluding and sidestepping exact specs, but it'll be out this summer. We know that at the very least, what it should be shooting, let's see if I can find it here, what it should be shooting is at a minimum 6K. We should be shooting at a minimum of 6K. And so what we're trying to see is it going to be something that's comparable to what the R5 is capable of? We don't know 100% yet, but at least we're shooting 6K, which is great. The other big giant question mark is in the light of Canon saying that they're going to have 4K 120 FPS. Is that something that's going to happen? And it looks like it should. At least we're having 4K 10-bit 422, which is a fantastic codec to be talking about. You apparently could get 4K 120 RAW over HDMI, so shooting to kind of a Samsung T5 drive, if that's something that you're into, right? The other question that I'm always curious about, and they're talking about a fully revamped body in a way that, something that we've never seen before, brand new image sensor. If they give us a fully revamped body, will it be something that's similar to the ZV-1 in terms of it having a fully articulating screen? A couple years back, I was at WPPI, whatever the wedding photography thing is in Vegas, WPPI, and I had the chance when they announced at that conference the A7 Mark III, which is one of the cameras that I have and absolutely love. But I had a chance to talk to the VP of marketing for North America, and I said, how many millions do you guys have invested in this screen that you will not just abandon it and give us a fully articulating screen? And he kind of sidestepped, and you could the video somewhere on my channel. He kind of sidestepped and said, we're listening to our community and we're trying to give them the best of what they want, and they've made improvements. Right now, I'm coming to you on a 6600, which has a flip-up screen. The ZV-1 has a fully articulating screen, so they're making improvements in terms of what we want from a fully articulating screen standpoint. I got to be honest, I would probably have the A7S Mark III rigged out with an external monitor as well. So the need for a fully articulating screen in my workflow is not paramount, but it would be really nice to have. It is something that is really nice to have. So will it have a fully articulating screen? We're not 100% sure. Auto-focusing systems between Canon and Sony are also something that the competition has been fierce. Obviously, Canon's dual-pixel autofocus is fantastic, and it's kind of the industry standard at this point. But the IAF that is found now in all of these new Sony cameras is phenomenal, and the tracking that it has is really just unbelievable how great they've gotten at their autofocusing system. The other thing, like I said, is Sony menus are always kind of funky and just not intuitive. And the battery and color science issue are things that have plagued us in the past. This newer run of A64 and A6600 cameras alongside of the A9 and A7S Mark III batteries have been a massive improvement from the little tiny ones that we saw on the A7S Mark II and A6500 prior. You couldn't really enter a shoot with less than 9 batteries for the day, and even still you were swapping out and charging things just in case you didn't make it through. So battery life was terrible. Color science was not as good as Canon. It's improving every single time, starting with the A9 and the A7 Mark III, just massive improvements where that is concerned. It's just a bigger learning curve on how to grade Sony picture profiles, and that should be an interesting thing. One thing I forgot to mention is that Canon is giving us a log mode native to the R5, which we haven't seen before. That's kind of a software upgrade that you would have to do after the fact if you're shooting on a 5D Mark IV, and obviously you would get it with the Cine bodies, but the log mode is something that's been included. But log mode is something that Sony's been offering all the way since the A7S Mark II. So you see that there's kind of interesting things where Canon has kind of blown past people, but then are also just catching up in other aspects of this particular camera. It's rumored to have this camera be somewhere in the neighborhood. Let's see if it's on this one. I forget exactly what it is. Somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 for the body of an A7S Mark II, or Mark III, excuse me, which at that point, I think is a very fair point, price point, and it's also incredibly competitive where Canon is concerned. Really, the Sony, I think, knows that they have a pretty substantial user base that's just waiting for this particular camera to come out, and so they're trying to keep it attractive from a price point standpoint so that we don't have people jumping ship and going back to Canon. So a couple other things that I'm thinking about where Canon's concerned. I know that there's been quite a bit of conversations. Look at all these little pop-ups that I want to get rid of. Quite a bit of conversation about the overheating issues that we've been having. And that's not uncommon. I've had overheating issues in my Sonys as well, especially as you get into the summer months and you're shooting outside. I do quite a bit of fitness and kind of like health and wellness shooting. And so when you're in those environments, it's definitely something that is you have to be conscious of, especially in shooting in higher resolutions. There's been a whole bunch of different stuff on how you could address this. Canon issues statements talking about how you could basically put a fan on certain things and reduce the heat buildup. It gives you some sort of spec in terms of what resolution and frame rate you're shooting at and how long you would have to wait to have things cool down. That's an unfortunate side effect of having these smaller mirrorless bodies involved in these cameras, is that there's just not enough room, ergonomically speaking, to insert any of these cooling fans like you would in a big cine body. And Sony has one of those issues as well, and they're just constantly trying to figure out how do you get some cooling systems into these smaller bodies. Is it a deal breaker for some people? I don't think so. I just think that really we have to figure out a way and how to make this work for our workflow, right? I think I got to let my dog out. Just one second. These are real life streaming issues. Hold on, pup. Come on, baby. Get out of here. Go on. The unintended consequences of going live. So we have this overheating issue, which I don't think is going to be a massive issue, but it is definitely a talking point, and especially if you're Sony, you're going to hone in on that and kind of try and break people open and discuss it as well. But they should tread lightly because obviously Sony's had some overheating issues as well. The other thing that I want to talk about is really what it looks like from a workflow standpoint. On paper, saying that you have the ability to shoot 8K RAW is just a very, very impressive spec to be able to put out. But I question, this is a conversation I would have all of the time when everyone was saying, I got to get a camera with 4K, got to get a camera with 4K, 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 4K all day. Do you have the processing power to work with 4K footage after the fact? Does your tiny little MacBook Pro have the ability to crank through 4,000 lines of resolution? Most people don't. And so that brings me to my next point, that if you're concerned and you're excited about the specs that are coming out and you just want this big 8K tag or stamp on things that you're using, I have to ask that question. Do you have the processing power to mess with 8K raw footage? I would say that 99% of us don't. And so that becomes an extra aspect of shooting with these larger resolution cameras, these higher resolution cameras. You have to take into consideration that eventually, probably pretty soon after you spend $4,000 on the body, you're going to have to do substantial upgrades to either your Mac or your PC environment. If you don't have a modular unit where you can swap out component parts, that means potentially buying a brand new computer to be able to handle that type of workload. Thankfully, right now, as you guys probably know, I have this PC build that I've been doing, and I can make it modular and swap out my CPU and GPU and not have it be a crazy cost as it relates to shooting or working with an iMac or a MacBook Pro. You don't have the options to kind of spec up afterwards. They're non-modular units. So it's really something that I've been taking into consideration. For me personally, where do I stand where this is concerned? If I switch back to Canon and start using a Canon R5 because of the high resolution frame rate, high resolution that we have in 8K and the 4K 120 frame rates, I'd have to not only get the body, but I'd also start to have to get different lenses. I shoot all manual cine lenses that are all Sony EF mounts, so I'd have to figure out either I'm remounting those things via an adapter, or I'm getting new glass for Canon. So that's a substantial cost for me because the new RF mounts are not cheap. The other thing that I would have to consider, again, is the workflow stress that it would put on my system, shooting 8K and 4K at 120 FPS. The other thing is storage. So if it's not just as easy as saying, okay, it's a $4,000 buy, there's all of these other ancillary costs that you have to incur in order to effectively use that camera setup and make your workflow something that's going to make you not want to pull your hair out. I can't stand stuttering footage, and now that I have this type of a setup where my edits are super fast and my workflow is nice and smooth, even with proxy workflows, I don't know that I could go back to a system or spend much time with a beautiful camera that I can't work well with in post. I understand it's, you know, beautiful codecs and 422 and all this different stuff that makes it easier to work with, but it's still an unbelievable amount of data that you're putting in. And if you start shooting in 8K on a regular basis, our boy MKBHD has an enormous 32 terabyte RAID system that he's using to house, you know, 10 to 12 minute videos that he's putting out there. It's a substantial amount of information, not only to work with, but also to store. So I would venture, if I'm starting to spec some of these things out, it's another at least $1,000 in PC parts or in processing parts. You're talking about $4,000 for the body, another minimum $2,000 for a lens. So right there, you're looking at, you know, $6 to $7 grand in order for you to get in the game on a Canon R5 system. So that's a big ante to pay up just to get into this thing. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait to see what's going on in my Sony world. And once that happens, I'm going to start to see what that workflow looks like a little bit. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to have to upgrade 12-core processing to just kind of work with these higher resolutions. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It makes it able to kind of work from the, you know, cameras like Reds, Aries, those types of things. So so that's what my position is at this point. I'm going to stick with what I've got. I'm going to use the glass that I have that I know, because at this point, at least from what we see from the A7S Mark III rumors, it's not going to be a new mounting system. The mounting system is going to be the same, so probably still EF glass. Stick with my lenses, stick with my computer, my processing power, wait to see what the effectively cheaper A7S Mark III looks like, and go from there. Hopefully it comes soon. But will I be renting a Canon R5 setup and doing a bunch of different shoots with that thing to see what it looks like? You bet your ass I'm going to. You bet your ass I'm going to. What's up, Jordan? How you doing, buddy? So yeah, guys, so that's what I'm thinking about. I'm happy that you guys kind of came in this thing with me as well. I'm trying to keep it under a 20-minute timeline. So these are the things that I've been thinking about a lot as I look through the specs, as I see all the different raw footage and the examples that are coming out. Canon R5 is just a gorgeous looking image. I'm not surprised because Canon's continuously giving us beautiful image quality, but I question the workflow, I question the processing power, and I question the initial ante to get into that system is pretty significant. Videography and photography is not cheap. It's definitely something that you need to have some coin to do. I just don't want people going into debt just to buy cameras and lenses and things like that. So with that in mind, guys, Robert Teagarden, if you liked the video, please like the damn video. If you haven't already and want to hear more about this type of stuff, go ahead and check the channel out. I give filmmaking tutorials and talk about the business of being creative and put up videos every single week. So if you like what you see here, go ahead and click subscribe, ring the bell for post notifications. And with that in mind, thank you again so much for tuning into this live stream. We'll be putting out another video this week, I think, about my PC build year follow-up. So stay tuned for that. All right, y'all. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.